Hello, everybody, again. By the way, I've met a few of you over the break and a few people here from Ukraine, too. So personally, my heart goes out to you, absolutely. I hope that can be resolved soon. So, yes, stand with Ukraine. Cheers. What I'm actually here to talk about today is zero trust, right? And I get some more time to delve into the details about that now. What is zero trust, right? This is not a HashiCorp term. This is not a standard that you can comply to point by point. It's not FIPS. You don't comply or violate a principle 1.2 of zero trust, right? This is a concept that you need to consider by default if you are making a plan change from a private data center into, I'm gonna almost fall off the stage, into a cloud or into a public network environment, right? So you have to assume that you can trust nothing and you must authenticate and authorize everything, okay? Now, this is just again a little bit of the vendors that use a combination of these solutions that we have. Zero Trust inside HashiCorp really consists of a couple of different products of ours that you can use together. If you've ever seen any of these in the news for being compromised or having an outage or an attack, we find that, in fact, quite a few of them, 1,000 plus enterprise customers, 8 of the Fortune 10 and 125 plus of the Fortune 125 use a combination of these products, mostly Vault, let's be realistic, right? And along the lines of Yuri, people using Terraform to deploy our products using community code, guess what? There's a lot of bad Terraform code out there. Some things will download zip files, not verify checksums, not verify signatures, and run. Be very careful which Terraform community code you use to deploy, right? And personally, Kelsey Hightower, by the way, everybody's favorite Google speaker, has released the deployment of Vault on Cloud Run. Actually, my personal favorite way to deploy Vault because it costs almost nothing in a non-production environment anyway. And I myself actually have validated the GKE option for Vault as well in a couple of our products, including Autopilot, which we recently certified as well. So if you are in the ecosystem, I still think this is a typo. This keeps appearing in this deck. 10 years, 20 companies have experienced breaches over $1 million in cost. I think that number is old, and I think ransomware is probably having it at about that amount per week, right? Everybody who's been held to ransomware that pays silently and you never hear about, right? Nobody wants to admit publicly that they've been compromised. If you pay the ransom, keep things quiet. I think those numbers are underreported, right? So 90% of these companies now use Vault. If somebody's been caught out or in the news for being compromised again, it's usually within a week that someone will approach us for learning about Vault as part of their solution, right? Some people think you install one of our HashiCorp products and it will protect you just to buy it, just to have it installed. No, you have to have a wider strategy, right? So again, this concept of legacy data center security was easy. You have trusted 4 walls, you have trusted cabling, you have maybe a biometric entrance. Trusted people are allowed in, nobody else is allowed in. And probably monitoring of that, right? Security cameras, who's done what. You have access to firewall rules that again are fixed, static, point-to-point. IP addresses are permanent potentially. But what happens when your apps, either locally or across the WAN, need to be changed dynamically, right? Again, so we take a world that goes to a very much more shifty, dynamic environment. Again, I talked about this earlier and briefly. Now you can't assume that your IP address will be the same day to day. You may have to also worry about virtual networking, private public IP addresses, IPv4 on one side, IPv6 on another side, right? Who knows what those lines are covering, if they're public, if they're private, if they're trusted, if somebody has a packet sniffer or something in between you and the cloud. And guess what? In Georgia, again, you don't have cloud regions here, right? So you have to cross cables across potentially more than one international border to get at your data. Is your data encrypted in transit? You better hope so, right? This is not something that is guaranteed unless you are implementing best practices. Okay, so When we take this dynamic approach, we give a bit of a three-tiered approach. Again, you have a static network, static firewalls, IP-based HSMs, potentially CM software. And I don't know how you pronounce it, but I always like you see them. That's what that's all about. Physical access and restrictions, again, you restrict who can access your storage, your hard drives, your network, right? Now you go to a modern data center, starting with the basics of DHCP, right? Guess what? We have a randomly assigned address, IP address, good for a limited time that we lease, and everything changes on the fly, right? This happens today in a data center. This is not cloud only. But we need to go to a way that accommodates that, and not just from the networking standpoint, IP addresses, but identity and software-defined access controls. Okay, so the three-tiered approach to this, again, with three of our HashiCorp products that focus on this. Note single sign-on obviously is not HashiCorp, and if you see anybody else give this talk, these are blank. I'm cheating and I'm showing you them right away, right? So you get a feel for what we're dealing with. So Vault is, again, our secrets management tool. Good for machine to machine authorization and access, and also human to machine access, right? Including things like encryption keys, database credentials, anything that can be now treated as a dynamic secret. HashiCorp is for our machine to machine access, again, service mesh. And Boundary is our up and coming now enterprise offering around human to machine access, right? So layer 8. Now, what this looks like, start with Vault. Again, my opinion, the biggest problem we have with Vault is the name Vault, right? If anybody's never used Vault before, they may think this is just a box where you do CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete secrets. What's the point of that, right? Vault, from HashiCorp's standpoint, is a magic box. Started in 2015. Instead of just, again, store, retrieve, person A, maybe a DBA, creates a username and password, puts that into a vault, person B or application B reaches into the vault, takes that out and uses it. That's compromise, okay? Say it's compromise. What auditor is going to be able to identify who did that, right? Everybody's going to point fingers at everybody else. This is his problem, not mine, her problem, not mine. There's no way to prove it because two people have seen that secret. That's not a secret anymore, right? So Vault takes advantage of this same concept of DHCP to become a dynamic secret leaser, right? So I need a database credential. The DBA has already configured a way for Vault to generate these randomly for me. I'm a user, I need a database credential good for 1 hour, just like my IP address lease is good for 1 hour, 1 month, 1 day. And after that time, if I haven't renewed my lease, revoke it, right? So say I forget to revoke that, or I'm a contractor and I'm good for 1 week, I leave and I forget to clean up my credentials, Vault is there to purge them for me, right? So Vault is acting as a broker for these identities. So I have on the left a subset of the authentication methods that I can use to log in, right? Vault is not designed to be another directory for your logins. It can do user password credentials, but we don't prefer you do that. Rely on LDAP, OIDC, single sign-on solutions that you've already defined these groups. Rely on automation, things like service accounts. A VM stands up, you didn't have to build in an identity into the image, but guess what? It can still authenticate at runtime because the cloud or the Kubernetes scheduler, orchestrator, I should say, has injected that identity at runtime, right? Once you're authenticated in, you have a token. Whether you're a human or a machine user, automation user, you have a token, which is the API token for your single accessor, universal accessor, almost like a Kerberos ticket, you might think. Then you have, by policy, access to one or more secret engines, which are essentially mounted like file systems within Vault, right? So again, give me a dynamic SSH certificate, signed certificate, not keys, right? Keys are great, they don't have an expiration. So if somebody comes across my SSH key, which I happen to have in my laptop, which is unguarded over there, guess what? I can't do that, I have to go and clean up all my keys, right? Certificates, just like TLS certificates have a lease, not a lease time, but a TTL, a time to expire, and they also have a CRL, so you can revoke them manually, right? Vault will generate me short-lived access for 1 hour, for 5 minutes to get a certain job done. And this the CA is configured on those SSH servers. We have clients in London, people in the finance world that are doing this for production machines. A production VM that's trading 10 or $100 million of stock a day should not be accessed by a single user, right? So if you've used Vault open source, maybe you've got one user who goes in and gets a SSH credential as root for production maintenance. That's great for one person in maybe a streaming or media company. If I'm in a bank and I'm dealing with 10 or $100 million of transactions, I want to make sure that that's not just one person. So we have control groups, an extra wrapper around all the secret engines to say, instead of here's your password or here's your token, here's a little thing you need to pass around your group. 3 members of your LDAP group have to approve this before you get that, right? And that's all audit trailed, so that if somebody needs access to a database credential or a cloud account to do a Terraform apply, without doing it on their own, you can limit that to a group approval, right? Similarly with multi-factor authorization effectively, right? So you can authenticate in by one of these methods, have an additional policy that yes, you have an API token, but we're going to make sure you're a human being, not a machine or not a malware bot or something. You have to enter a token when you read or write or access one certain point of the API. Again, enterprise-only feature. Okay, so this is actually a subset of the secret engines and auth methods. If anybody's curious, take a look at the webpage. We also have some very few use cases which are enterprise-only along the secret engine side. Okay. Again, a very popular product, our #1 product by revenue. Vault's got probably more than that. Kubernetes downloads a year. Over 16 million Vault open source downloads a year, and I think that's from our releases page, not our releases page and our Linux repos, not so much our GitHub, right? GitHub may be different as well if people are building from source. Again, don't trust any of these builds from the community, right? Plenty of legacy code out there downloads someone else's build of Vault and deploys it, and you think, oh, it must be safe, it's Vault, right? Don't trust an unsigned, unverified image of Vault, whether it's from Docker registry, which should be our official registry, or one of the community repos that we run. Okay. Also, again, talking about scale. I don't think I have a bit in here about scale, but we do have, again, enterprise option to scale out. Now, the one use case that would typically need that, most secrets are fairly small, right? They don't need much intensive I/O or network. The one use case which is really tending to load down a Vault is the transit engine. So encryption as a service. Create me a private public key pair, never share the private key. I don't want anybody to see that, even the Vault admins, right? This is not accessible within Vault unless you compromise the memory of the host. I may potentially encrypt, decrypt, sign, verify large payloads. And again, talking about the software, the integrity of your software and your artifacts, right? So we have, again, just certified the GKE autopilot option for running Vault. And I thought, this is strange. I would never actually use, yes, autopilot is great, but I would never use autopilot for Vault unless I was doing an auto scale cluster with the scale out option. And the Vault team said, yes, that's exactly what we're looking for. So we currently have a customer who did this with GKE autopilot scaled out to, I think, 100 Vault nodes and handled, I can't remember if the number was official or not, between 400 and 500,000 encrypt, decrypt, and sign, verify transactions per second. So this scales out really super well. Great. Again, we have identity brokering, and this is a theme you'll see among a couple of the products that we have in Zero Trust. You want to rely on some outside identity, right? Again, you're not going to just take your user password everywhere and use it. You have to have a short-lived credential at every point using Vault, because you don't want those logs and your Terraform apply to show cloud credentials. You don't want to show anything in logs. You must assume that everything should potentially show up in a log, and you want to have that revoked by the time people see that, right? Everything's short-lived. Okay. Note on HCP. So we have HashiCorp Cloud Platform as our managed instances of Vault, Vault Console, and we just actually have betas for Boundary and Waypoint as well. These are, again, if I don't want to manage my own Vault, but I do want support, a quick way to get a Vault up and running and managed and supported by HashiCorp. Bonus, these are built on usage, right? So there's no need to play poker with our sales team. I hope this isn't recorded and the sales team is going to come on fine that I said that. But you don't have to play poker with the sales team. HCP will bill you just based on your usage, right? So if you have one vault, maybe in an HA cluster, replicated to a different region, if you pay up front for vault, that could potentially be, well, it could vary quite a bit based on your consumption. But we come back in a year later and find that you haven't used it as much as you thought, or you haven't migrated as many applications to use Vault. This will bill you based on your usage. So if you just want to try Vault, you want to get in one application at a time, great way to get up and running. Okay. Now, again, push button deployment, fully managed infrastructure, one multi-cloud workflow. Now, caveat, one multi-cloud, in this case, currently only means AWS and a few regions of Azure. GCP is on the way, so Google we're going to have hopefully fairly soon. Okay, so again, it's secrets management, encryption, decryption, credentials management, etc. What about machine-to-machine access? Again, Consul, which started out as our service discovery tool, is continuing to add features all the time. And now if I take a look at the ecosystem, and unfortunately Google has their own preferences for service discovery, right? Kubernetes, and we have Istio as service mesh. If you break down the components of Kubernetes that actually are built into Consul, think about etcd, right? Key value storage in Consul, which is clustered, by the way. I have the health checks of the Kube scheduler. I have the Kube DNS, right? Consul contains a DNS service to look up your services. And I also have the service mesh equivalent of Istio. So I have the Consul ability to use its own proxy or control Envoy proxy to route traffic with automatic mutual TLS between services, right? Now, extra good advantage, extra nice advantage. Consul and most of our binaries can run anywhere, right? They're compiled as Go, so they run on Windows, they run on Linux, they run on x86, ARM, whatever you can build it for. And Consul has the ability to seamlessly connect multiple Kubernetes clusters to VMs, to TIN, to physical machines. If I have a Windows database that's running that I need to connect automatically, and I want to have that mutual TLS advantage, and I want to have a policy-based enforcement, which I say this service is allowed to talk to another service, I can do that in a mixed hybrid environment. Really great way. I actually did an experiment at the beginning of COVID where I built this for S390X and Power. And guess what? You can have VMs or physical mainframes talking in a service mesh directly to Kubernetes services, right? With the Consul Kubernetes sync. Super helpful, okay? Again, we have the concept of the service registry. We have this multi-platform service mesh. So again, if you're multi-cloud or hybrid cloud and you need to make sure that traffic is encrypted and trusted end-to-end, Consul is there for that, right? And the network infrastructure automation, which is actually I'll be talking about later for 20 minutes, is also an option. So you can synchronize your F5 devices, your Cisco devices with this service discovery, okay? Again, multi-cloud, super handy. Maybe Cloud A has IPv4, different subnets, different standards, different routes, obviously, between them that you may or may not worry about. I don't even potentially have an IP address, right? I did an experiment here where I started up containers with no networking, and Consul can actually route Envoy to use Unix domain sockets. So I have a container without a network address, no visibility to the host network, communicating by Unix domain socket to an IP address somewhere on the other side of the planet, right? So I have no attack footprint on the network. The only way out is through Unix domain socket. Okay. Again, we have Nginx integrations. F5 is a big supporter of ours, and vice versa. If I do have a physical environment still with F5, I can have that transparently reflect my Consul services. And I have those Consul agents monitoring across the edge and across IoT, wherever I deploy it. Okay. So, again, remember, assume that I don't have an IP address, or assume the IP address may change. Consul is there for service to service. You don't have to worry about IP addresses. You just tell Consul what service can talk to the other service. Okay. Now, I'm just trying to catch up on time. So HCP console again, this is a little bit old, it says public beta, but this is in GA right now, I believe. So if I want to have a console cluster of servers again, not agents, console is another service agent product that we have, I can have that stood up by HCP as well. Okay, there we go. Now we're talking users. And I think that's wrong because there should be a boundary logo there. Human to machine access, this is what we're talking about boundary next. Okay. Again, this is fairly exciting because anybody who has had to deal with PAM before, privileged access management, say I need short-term access to sudo, or I need an elevated privilege for 10 minutes, but log all of my activity, or actually restrict my activity, right? Again, this is usually IP-based, it's usually SSH or RDP-based, and it's not necessarily conducive to a cloud environment. Okay. Well now, we take some of the features of console, service discovery, service mesh, end-to-end, MTLS, and we put that on the user. Okay. So again, traditional way that you would potentially join an organization, you show up as a contractor or a consultant for a month. You're given a single sign-on account, or maybe an LDAP account, VPN credentials, right? In a private DC, as a single sign-on to a cloud SSO, single sign-on. This tends to take a while, and where am I? Looking for this next one. There we go, that's boundary. I think I stuck a couple of extra ones in here. Okay, so again, traditional workflow. I show up for a short-term engagement. Step one, okay, I need to get VPN credentials, especially if I'm working from home, right? In a COVID world, a lot of people work from home still. Onboarding is difficult, so I have to wait for my VPN credentials. I have to connect to the VPN, potentially even using an SSH Bastion host. And guess what? Once I'm in, I see the whole network, right? I did some consulting at one of the big banks in London in my past before HashiCorp, and found that I had access to all of their foreign exchange trading code. And this is one of the biggest banks in the world. Why can I see all of that, right? This is problem number 2. Again, firewall will impose root access, right? Okay, well, I've got access to a certain IP or a bridge or a gateway. That may take care of access, but it doesn't take care of encryption. I don't know if my traffic is encrypted, right? So that 4-step process takes forever and takes all kinds of questions, leaves all kinds of questions in your mind, right? Now, take what have we designed boundary? And again, I go back to pragmatism, the Tao of HashiCorp. Log in with the trusted identity. So again, you have an outside directory or single sign-on. You don't have to worry about creating LDAP accounts or creating boundary user accounts or VPN users. I have auth based on roles and services. So you're a member of Group X. Group X has access to a certain number of SSH hosts or RDP hosts or database connections, right? Again, by policy, like console, you don't have to specify IP addresses. You express server names or host groups, as we say, as a policy, right? Once I'm in, I only have access to the hosts that I am supposed to see and the services that I'm supposed to see. I don't have access to the full network, which is great, okay? So I connect automatically. My credentials are not exposed. I don't see my password for SSH or my credential key. And I don't have to worry about encryption of a plain text service, right? Because Boundary will do that for me again. Now, if I were to talk about roadmap and why this is setting us up for an enterprise offering, think about what the power that gives you. You have protocol awareness. You can actually restrict certain commands being run, right? Yes, I'm allowed to SSH into a production machine from my home, which is strange. But I'm also not allowed to run certain commands. Those will be filtered, right? And I will be warned, okay, this is recorded. You're not supposed to run this command, okay? And that includes not just SSH, but protocols like databases, RDP, if I'm going to watch keystrokes. Any protocol that they implement will have that ability to both log your session, record everything you type and do, and also restrict what you can type and do, okay? There's a growing list of protocols actually supported right now, and again, it's open source only currently. So the enterprise offering hopefully will be here within a year. And again, the beta for HCP, full honesty, the hardest part about Boundary is setting up a server cluster. It involves all kinds of TLS certificates, all kinds of You have to have a KMS configured, right? If you don't have Terraform for it or some kind of automation around it, it becomes a pain. Talk about Kubernetes the hard way, the boundary the hard way, right? HCP will now stand you up a cluster automatically. And guess what? The gateways for Boundary, you may think of it as a replacement for a VPN server. Again, you have one single Boundary server listening on a network to your various services inside. Boundary Gateway, or Boundary Worker we call it, actually, is designed for cloud regions. But guess what? Again, Go binaries, console, mesh gateway, and Boundary Worker, both what I would consider analogs to a mesh gateway or a VPN gateway, can run on your home Wi-Fi router, right? So build it for ARM32 or ARM7 or ARM8, whatever ARM generation you're using, runs on your home Wi-Fi. It's great. I can expose a service or something in my local home to someone in another home. If we have a bunch of team members that are working from home, we can access each other's resources by policy. It's really great. It's flexible, super flexible. The options are pretty exhaustive. Okay. So again, the 4 tiers, and again, usually we're relying on an external single sign-on, which you probably already have. Let me back up a second. And if anybody has questions about these, again, I'll be around later to hear more. We do actually have, because I'm a partner solutions engineer, a competency program that we're putting together. We have 3 competencies that we're going to certify partners who have enough people skilled and certified on our technology and who meet the standards of contributing blogs and community posts. We have a zero trust competency that we're putting together. So that includes partners who will be good enough and certified with enough people in these combinations of products to be certified as public on our partners list. Okay. And one more thing, remember, we don't actually have employees in Georgia. Unfortunately, we don't have an office in Georgia. We have the partners, right? So HTS is here to help you with all our solutions as well. Okay. And again, any questions, I'll be outside afterwards, okay? All right. Thank you very much, and I will hand off for some more time.